Hello and welcome back. In February of 2021 I uploaded a video demonstrating the vintage Braun Atelier Hi-Fi system I'd bought, and that turned out to be a pretty popular video by my standards. There still aren't a huge number of videos about Braun Atelier Hi-Fi systems, and I've been meaning to do a deeper dive video to show the components I have in more detail. Around Christmas of 2022 I took the units out for a quick checkup to clean out any dust and to see if I could fix an annoying issue with the A1 amplifier. This gave me the opportunity to have a good look around inside and get some photos of the combined German and Japanese electronics. In this video I'll take you through the A1, T2, C1 and CD3 components, looking inside and at some of the history. I didn't work on the P1 record player, so we'll just have a look at the history and the features of the machine. First up, we'll have a look at the A1 amplifier. This was first seen in the 1980-1981 Hi-Fi catalogue when Braun reintroduced the Atelier line. This was the original name used by Braun for their combined radio receivers and turntables in the late 1950s and 1960s. The A1 was a cheaper alternative to the older A301 or A501 amps of the studio line, which is a little confusing as Atelier translates to studio from German and several other European languages. While the A1 couldn't power such big speakers as either the A301 or A501, it did have more audio inputs, including two phono inputs. All the inputs used RCA connectors rather than the DIN connectors on the studio line machines. One of the things I like about these Braun machines is how easy it is to get inside and service them. The top and bottom panels are held on by 4 screws, and you can then access all of the boards inside. Once the top is off, you can see that the electronics are almost entirely made up of discrete components, with only a handful of ICs. The Sanken 2SC2773 transistors sit in the middle rail and uses as a heatsink. I'm not sure how many components on this machine have been replaced, other than the main power relay, which was documented when I bought it. I'd be grateful to know if anything here has obviously been replaced, as I can't find date codes within this machine. There are lots of wire wrap connections in here, which I'll admit to being pretty scared of. I'll try to never touch these. Over by the main volume potentiometer, there are a couple of different methods for keeping the cables tidy. This potentiometer is easy to access, so I give it a clean with switch cleaner and lubricant every time I take the lid off. These boards are the phono equalization circuits for both phono inputs. Each one contains 2 ICs. The boards slot through the main board below and are soldered beneath, so I'm not worried about the slight wonkiness of the board furthest away. You'll see a photo of the underside shortly. To the left are the slide switches for the record and input select dials. We'll come back to those later as well. The name and serial number label is also visible here, as it will be on the other Hi-Fi components. These big capacitors appear to be quite old, but I'm happy to be corrected if it looks like they've been replaced. In the centre is the Mitsubishi M4C51 bridge rectifier and its lovely heatsink. Next to that is the main power relay, which I know has been replaced. At the front, this is one of the 2 circuit boards controlling the front LED display. This is the display preamp board according to the service manual and contains the 4559DF dual op-amp integrated circuit. Behind the front panel is this board with the LEDs and 2 sharp IR2E01 dedicated LCD or LED level meter driver ICs. These capacitors look quite new, so I think these might have been replaced. Our final stop in the tour of the A1 is the underside of the machine and the various boards. As you can see, access to service them is very good. In the top left you can see the phono equalization boards protruding through. The solder points for the main transistors are easy to access, and the board traces around them are very wide. Now let's go back to the top of the machine and I'll explain the issue I have. Of the 2 selector dials, the input selector on the right here is completely fine. The record selector on the left is less fine. It's out of position and can skip without changing the selection. You can more clearly see how the selector works here. You turn the dial and the gear turns the perpendicular gear that appears to be missing teeth. In fact, neither gear has a complete set of teeth to provide a positive stop at either end of travel. Inside the plastic housing is a metal gear that engages with a metal band, pushing it backwards and forwards along the black sleeve. This moves the switching contacts at the other end. You can see the metal gear in this picture, taken after the dial was removed and the mechanism lifted out. Essentially, my issue is that the metal teeth are not properly meshed with the metal band, so it skips and gets out of position. I'm not experienced enough to repair this, but if I can find a replacement assembly, I can simply swap it out, as it can be easily removed without disassembling any other part of the amplifier. For now, I've stopped using the selector dials on the front panel completely and switch all audio signals on the DAP iMix 7.3 mixer I've made a video of previously. Onto the T2 tuner. When I bought this set, it originally came with a T1 tuner, but it was faulty. I was offered a replacement T2 as an upgrade due to its more reliable digital tuning, and I gladly accepted it. The T1 used a string-operated analog tuner. The T2 appeared in the 1982 catalogue alongside the upgraded A2, P2 and P3. There are many more ICs in this machine compared to the A1. To the bottom right you can see the digital tuning wheel, a red LED followed by a segmented pulse wheel, the detection circuit and a metal flywheel. The wheel rotates in notches, but they're very smooth and each notch relates to a 0.05 MHz increment in the tuning. One full rotation of the wheel is 0.5 MHz. The main board still has lots of discrete circuitry, including lots of trim potentiometers that I won't be touching. On the front board that connects to the display and LEDs, there is a Toshiba TD6301AP chip and another TC9147BP. There are also a couple of other Toshiba chips hidden underneath the ribbon cables. None of the chips appear to have dates on them. The name and serial number label is displayed on the back, above the antenna connections. On once again to the C1 Cassette Deck and a step back in time. The C1 was introduced with the A1 and wasn't replaced with the C2 until 1983. The C1 only has twin heads. Information is a little confusing, but Braun only introduced 3 heads with the much later C3 and C4 cassette decks. The C1 has Dolby B, that was just called Dolby at this point, and MPX noise reduction, along with settings for all tape types. Once again we have lots of discrete circuitry in here, with the Dolby chip present along with a 4558D dual op amp and a partially hidden LA4170 from Sanyo Semicon device, a dedicated 2-channel headphone amplifier chip. According to the manual, the silver component in the centre is a relay and it's labelled as Alps, but I can't find any information about it online. Both motors are date labelled as 1980 and are both Matsushita, now known as Panasonic since 2008. One motor controls the sliding drawer and the other controls the tape mechanism. The belts on this machine were changed before I bought it, so I won't have to worry about that for a while. And here we can see the label again. There's likely more circuitry I could have shown you behind the front panel, but I didn't need to go in there, so I left it alone. And next up is the CD3. This is a later device again that originally appeared in the 1984 catalogue. Realistically, it wasn't too far behind the first CD player from Sony, and as you'll see, it uses some Sony components. Inside, the discrete circuitry on the top board is vastly reduced. According to the service manual, there is more on the lower board, but still much less than the A1 or the C1. The chips we see here are from prominent Japanese manufacturers. There are 2 Sony 20152 chips without dates, a Sony CX23035 chip dated as the 17th week of 1985, a Sony CX23034 chip dated as the 21st week of 1985, 3 Toshiba chips marked as the 16th, 17th and 18th week of 85, and an undated Matsushita chip. These are joined by support chips that are likely op-amps as in the previous machines. Behind the tray mechanism are a pair of BA6109 motor drivers, and the label is tucked into the corner. Finally, I'll talk about the P1 record player. I didn't take this apart as I had no reason to, but I can briefly go through the history of it. The P1 was introduced with the A1, C1 and T1 in 1980 as a fully automatic direct drive turntable with quartz lock. The lock could be disengaged for pitch adjustment with the control wheel to the left, and there was a little illuminated strobe window to confirm the speed. Buttons for speed and diameter select are on the front. Braun messed around with the design of the Atelier turntable in later versions, often changing and then changing back to a previous design with the next release. Other than adding track skipping in the P4, it never really changed much from the original. And that's the end of the deeper dive into my Braun Atelier components. I hope it was interesting to anyone who didn't know much about these machines before, or hasn't seen inside them, and I hope it's a good advert for quality 1980s German engineering. I'm really happy with these hi-fi components and I plan to keep them for a long time. Until next time, thanks for watching.